All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Hope everybody is doing well tonight. Tonight, we're going to pick up where we left off last night, which is designing, or at least coming up with the game design document for the first game that we're going to write using the Kohi engine. And just as a quick reminder, the reason we're doing this now, even though we have other things going on with the engine, is to sort of get a top level feature list of the things that we're going to need to add to the engine in order to support this. Which I don't think that list is going to be very long, but we want to at least, kind of get that started on, so that way we have most of what we need by the time we actually start developing the game. So before we jump into that, I do want to take just a quick second and thank the supporters of the channel, beginning with our partners who are the highest tier of subscription over on YouTube memberships and Patreon. They are Dustin Punt, Gabby Bashir, and Group Bullies Inc. I'd also like to thank all the other supporters listed here on the screen. They're a combination of the other tiers of support over on Patreon, YouTube memberships, as well as Twitch subscriptions. So thank you all very much for your support. It is greatly appreciated and helps me cover expenses having to do with the channel, the project, equipment, and so on. So very much appreciated. Thank you. And of course, a special thanks goes out to all of you guys, the viewers, who you're either catching me here on VOD after the fact or here live. I appreciate you guys being here as well. We do stream live on Twitch and YouTube simultaneously, so I've got the chats up here. This is designed to be an interactive stream, so feel free to jump in and be part of the conversation. I like interacting with you guys. So. But yeah, without you guys, obviously this project wouldn't exist. So thank you guys for being here and being awesome in general. All right, Singy, good to see you. Welcome, welcome. And Magetz, good to see you as well. And Sergeant Pepper, good evening to see you. Good evening to you as well. Good to see you. Ran all those together in one word, but close enough, So yeah, as I mentioned before, we're doing something a little bit different tonight. I wonder if maybe I should zoom this in a little bit. That might make it a little easier for you guys to read. Okay, so we are doing things a little bit differently tonight. We're kind of picking up where we left off on last night's stream. And so last night we sort of came up with this high concept of the first game that we're going to write using Kohi. And so we've got the basic idea now. And, the next couple of steps are, at some point we need to figure out a name, although that's not hugely important right now. And then what we really need to do is start building on a game design document, right? So going more into details about, some of these specific vehicles or styling or some of the ideas, fleshing things out. Talking about the technology we're going to use, what platforms we're going to support, what the user base is, etc. All those kind of things. And so that is what we're going to start working out tonight, because the idea behind this particular game project is that I want to show all the steps of doing this from start to finish. And so a big part of that step is early design, right? And so that's kind of where we're starting off on this. So we're going to sort of dip our toes in a little bit this week and work that out. Next week, I expect we'll probably get back to the code, but I just wanted to kind of switch gears for a little bit and do something a little bit different, and also get sort of a feature list of the things that we're going to need to support that first game. So with all that said, I can stop with the intro stuff now, and we can actually get into it. So I did do a little bit of thinking in terms of a name idea, and I really liked the word velocity as the potential name for the game. Unfortunately, there was a game released in 2012 that has that same name, so I can't use it. And so, the first thing I came up with was, Kohi is a sort of misspelling of the Japanese word for coffee, right? And so I was like, well, what's the Japanese word for velocity, right? And that is sokudo. And so this is the kanji for that, and the hiragana for that as well. And I really I think this is kind of neat. right? But the problem I have with this is it's really potentially close for Sokoban. Or not Sokoban, Sudoku, rather. I don't know why I was thinking Sokoban. And Sudoku is, it's actually just, the do and the ku are just backwards, right? But that's the game where you have, a grid. Usually it's like a 3x3 grid, and you have to make, the numbers 1 through 9 and make them add up and stuff. And so the problem is like, even when I searched this in Google, and I searched this exact term, it was giving me Sudoku as search results. So I don't know that that's going to work, right? That might actually be an issue. But I wrote it down anyways because I do kind of like it. Yeah, it sounds really close to Sudoku. Exactly. Yeah. Not to be confused with seppuku. Yeah. That would be a really short game, right? But yeah, so unfortunately, I don't think this is going to work for that reason, because it's just too close. Like, you could look at the kanji and know that it's not that, right? But if you don't speak Japanese, you're not going to know that. So, it's kind of an interesting idea, and I like the word velocity as well, but that's already taken. So something around those lines is kind of what I would like to eventually name it. But again, I don't really necessarily want to go too far down the road with naming, because we can pick the name at basically at the last minute, or whenever we start the marketing. We basically just have to have the name by then. So all right, so just to recap where we left off, what we're going to build is an endless runner style game where the player pilots a vehicle. So it might be a motorcycle, spaceship. We have a few other ones down below. And they travel along a predetermined road or path that has obstacles to avoid and enemies to engage in combat with, right? So most of these endless runner games, you're just avoiding obstacles, right? You're getting pickups and you're sort of avoiding obstacles, and you kind of jump over something or you duck underneath of something. And this has that, or will have elements of that. But the idea here is that there is also some combat involved. So what that means is, like, you might be on a motorcycle, and maybe another motorcycle comes up alongside you and starts swinging a baseball bat at you, right? Trying to knock you off your bike. And you basically have to knock them off the bike before you get knocked off the bike, kind of thing. And there'll be other types of combat as well. So there'll be like melee. I'm figuring there might be, ranged combat as well. Different pickups and power-ups and stuff that you can get. And there might be like an upgrade to your vehicle where, like, maybe there's a gun mounted on the front of it or something like that, right? And so there'll be various different types of vehicles, each having their own different abilities. Some of them will be upgradable. And then there will be different environments with different sets of challenges for those environments. And then there's also this difficulty will increase as the game goes on. Later levels may also have vertical tracks that the player can switch to when using a flying vehicle. So before we get into that, we should say that, like, these are some of the ideas that we were talking about in terms of vehicle types. So we might start on like a hoverboard, right? Where it's not particularly fast, and it's it can't really fly, right? It just hovers at ground level. But it's very easily maneuvered, right? So you can maybe access places or get items that a faster moving vehicle wouldn't be able to because it goes too fast, right? And so the hoverboard would basically be able to go over land, the surface of any water, but it's unable to fly or dive. And then we would have a motorcycle, right, which is land only, but is very fast. So a motorcycle might be able to jump over obstacles or something, and because of its increased speed, might be able to access things via those jumps that maybe the hoverboard wouldn't be able to, for example. And then we have a boat, which is only on the surface of the water, right? So it can't dive. Obviously, if your boat is diving, you're in for a bad time, right? Or obviously you can't run it up on land, because that obviously doesn't work either, right? And then we have a submarine, And so that can go along the water's surface, or it can dive below. The idea was brought up for a jetpack, right? So this can do land, the water surface, and flying. And a jetpack, again, wouldn't necessarily be super fast. It would be sort of kind of like the hoverboard, where maybe you're not moving as fast through the level, but you have sharper maneuverability than, say, the spaceship or an airplane, right? And so this would be above surface only. And so we have, some of these vehicle ideas that we came up with. Maybe a car is another one, right? Maybe a car can do things that a motorcycle can't. I don't know. But that's kind of the idea there. Thank you for the follow, by the way. And so we have these different vehicles, potentially with upgrades. We haven't really talked about upgrades yet, or pickups, or power ups, or any of those kind of things. So that's another thing we should probably flesh out. And then there's also the concept that vehicles are not tied to a specific level. So you can use any vehicle for any level, assuming it is capable of traversing said level, i.e. you can't use a motorcycle on a water level, right? So for example, the first level would initially be traversed with the hoverboard, but if the player returns there upon getting the spaceship, there would be extra content and above tracks that the player could not previously see without the proper vehicle. Same goes for underwater. So most endless runners, you have that sort of one plane that you travel along, and you're sort of running along that, and then you've got the individual lanes, right? And you can jump over things or you can dive under things, but that's about the limitation of it, right? Whereas if you were to have a flying vehicle, for example, you could go above that surface, right? But then you could also go up several layers, right? So there's going to be a concept of not only do we have these tracks that are laid out horizontally, but there'll be sort of layers of tracks that are stacked vertically that you can go up and actually discover extra things within that same level. And so suddenly now we have levels that have these additional layers that make them replayable, right? And so, in that sense, there's also a sense of discoverability. What happens if you go in that same level with a motorcycle versus an airplane, right? And so that's kind of the idea there. And so, once you go through a level once, that's not necessarily the only time you go through that level. You can go through it again with a different vehicle and see what else you can pick up. And maybe it would be items that, would be useful later on in the game that wouldn't have been useful or shouldn't be allowed to be accessed early on in the game, for example. So yeah, that's kind of the overarching idea there. Let me catch up on some chat here. Vehicle. How about a small cloud? I mean, we could do... I don't want to start off with too many vehicles, right? I want to keep just a small subset of archetypes for vehicles, right? That have very specific uses for each one. Because my thought is once we get the core gameplay in, we can always add more, but I don't want to start with a ton. And so maybe we could expand it to have a cloud vehicle, right? But that's also going to be kind of hard to make look good as well in a non 2D game. Mean Mr. Mustard, how's it going? Good to see you. Let's see. I think I should start naming my games with Finnish names because they sound exotic enough for the foreigners. A few indie devs already do that. For example, Noiten means witch. I think I actually did look up velocity in Finnish for that reason. What was it again? Oh, yeah. It actually came out to be something kind of funny. Nopus. I don't know if that's how it's actually supposed to be pronounced, but yeah, it's Nopus. Which I don't necessarily want to have a game that's a big bunch of nope, right? But yeah, I did actually look that up at one point. But yeah, I'm going to play around with a few different languages and see if I can't come up with something. Someone will read that as Sudoku. I did. Me too. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the problem, right? Like, I'm not going to be able to, as much as I like this idea, it's too close to Sudoku. Um, it's literally this guy and this guy reversed, right? So unfortunately, I don't think that's going to work. Um, so sad face on that. Okay, that's deeply horrifying. Google Docs, what are you doing? Is it because of my dark reader? Let's just convert that back to ASCII. Okay. Speed would be Vouty. So just to put it up there, like Vouty. Is that Finnish as well? Yeah, it's Finnish. Okay. Yeah, so that's an interesting one. I doubt there's a game out there called that. So yeah, that's probably, I'm gonna move that one up here, right? And the only reason that I'm leaving this one here is so that like I don't later go, oh, I should call it velocity, completely forgetting that I actually looked into it. Hyaku, rather. Yeah, that's hurry, isn't it? Like quickly. Yeah. Um, hmm. I don't hate it. I'll write it down. Um, let's see. There we go. So that's, I'm just going to write this so I can remember what because I don't always necessarily remember the kanji off the top of my head. There we go. All right, so I'll put this here, right? That's not bad. Yeah, that's not bad. Snellhide in Dutch. Beirut in Hebrew. Oh yes, I did look up the German, and nobody's going to be able to pronounce that. That's like I love German, by the way. It's a great language because there's like you just kind of cram words together a lot. Like my favorite example is the word for double clutch gearbox. Just here, let me pull it up actually. It is that. I love it. You're in Austria. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, German's great. I love German. The only problem is like I fear that a lot of people wouldn't know how to spell it and or be able to pronounce it. So like talking about it and searching for it might be an issue. So like the idea that I'm thinking for a lot of this stuff is going to be like short names. Like I want to keep it as short as possible. Like the reason I went with these ones is because these are all like 6 letters, right? Well, okay, this one is, yeah, they're all 6 letters. So like if it's, unfortunately, German doesn't have a lot of short words. But yeah, I do love German, but yeah, unfortunately, yeah. You're Dutch, screw the German language. I'm both, technically. My last name is actually Dutch, but yeah, I have a strong German background as well. So I'm both. um, Paulo Daniel, thank you so much for the 6 months of tier 1. Wow, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much for the support. That means a lot. Thank you. That's huge. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. That's definitely going to help a lot. I'm going to need that in the future for this project for sure. So thank you. Averte DSG, Dick's Sporting Goods. What? What is DSG? I'm not sure what you mean there. Using Spanish, you can make it. You can name it like a dad joke. Velocidad. Oh, Sergeant Pepper. That's. I see what you've done there, and I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. I wish there was like a lull in here, right? In Google Docs, but yeah, that's very funny. There's a bunch of synonyms in Finnish for nopea, like vikela, sukela, pikainen, ketera. I'm not sure that I'm pronouncing those right, but nopea is a form of nopus. Is it nopus or is it nopeus? I guess it would be nopeus, right? I keep reading it as nopus though. Like that's a whole bunch of nopus. They're all adjectives. Okay, I gotcha. Audi branded dual clutch gearbox. I thought it was just shorthand for it. Shorthand, yeah. I mean, shorthand is it's a relative term, right? Vroman does sound Dutch. Yes, it is. Yep, that's where my family comes from. For sure. We've been here in the States since the 1700s, but yeah. Velocidad is my favorite suggestion so far. What if we just fill the game full of dad jokes? Just like that. Like, the name, not only is the name of the game a dad joke, but also it's filled with dad jokes. Localizing those might be an issue, but that would be super funny. I'm gonna move this one. I'm gonna move this one to the top. Oops, up here. Yeah. So far it's between these two, but yeah, adding some humor to the game might go a long way, right? And the dad joke thing is actually pretty funny. Let me before we continue too much with this though, I suppose we could. Can I make a copy? Let's call this I guess we need kind of a code name for it until we actually pick a name. I don't know. Let's just go with Z Game. Yeah. You've come to know me and my humor. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean we do have Z Game, right? We did call it that in the Kohi repo, so maybe we'll just stick with that. All right, so let's make a copy of that. And this is actually what we're going to build into Flashbang. All right, sorry about that. All right, so let's actually start speccing out like what this game document's going to look like, right? So we're going to just say zgame design document. And we'll put, let's see, they have like a subtitle. They do. So the subtitle is going to be name to be determined, version 0.1. Right. And here we'll basically we'll call this section just high concept. All right. And eventually we are going to put we are actually going to put like a table of contents in here as well once the document starts to grow. So I guess we could put, we could leave name ideas in here. Let's move this all the way to the end though. And what we'll do is we'll call this, we'll put this heading 2 and we'll call this name ideas. And we'll call this appendix A, name ideas, right? And up here, we'll do heading 1, appendices. All right, so that's that section. We're also going to go with, we'll section this off, so we'll put references. References like reference images. Right, so far it's like we're basically just kind of moving stuff around here, right? And then let's see. So let's go vehicles. We'll call this section, let's see, I guess we'll do vehicles, right? We'll say vehicles. We can do art style. So we'll have to pick this tonight as well. So that'll be that. Art style should probably, and this doesn't really belong in here either. Let's put this under random ideas, and then we'll come back to that. So let's take art style. We'll move that up a little bit further, right? And then under here, we'll put a section for gameplay elements, right? And then this is going to be, let's see, this is high concept. We'll go with another section here, which we'll say is style and setting. Right, so we can kind of drill that down a little bit. We'll put a few other sections in here. So we're going to want one for, I guess we'll do target audience, right? We'll do another one for technology and platforms, right? And so in technology and platforms, we'll have like platforms officially supported. And under that, obviously, we'll have what we currently support, which is, we'll say Windows 10 plus. And then we'll do Mac OS. I actually don't know what the cutoff for Mac OS is going to be. So I think I'm on my streaming machine, which is also what I use to port this, is on 14.6. I can't see us needing to go any further back than, say, 12, maybe. I don't know. I'll take a shot in the dark and just say macOS 12 plus. And then Linux is technically supported, right? And we're going to say X11 only. And we're going to say Wayland support via X Wayland. I guess we can say is supported. I might back off on that, but we'll see if we run into a lot of issues with it. The Kohi. That's funny. Smudge, how's it going, by the way? Good to see you. Just saying Linux. Yeah, I mean, definitely, Linux is going to be supported, but like, just saying Linux is like a very wide spectrum, right? We're going to need to also have in here, and I don't know what this is going to be yet. We'll have to spec this out further. But we're going to need minimum system requirements, right? And then we're also going to need recommended system requirements, right? So that's a to-do and to-do, right? So technology is going to be, I guess we'll kind of talk about like some of the tech that we're already using and some of the tech that we may have to use in the future. So the things that I can think of, and I'm just going to bullet point these for now. We can expand on it later. So we're using Vulkan 1.3 plus, right? We're using OpenAL, and that's 1.1, and or OpenAL soft. So we probably need to think about redistributables with this. Right, so that's kind of an important bit. I should probably highlight these to-dos with, let's see, do we have... Let's make that nice and red. Wow, that is not red. Is that my dark reader screwing with it, I wonder? Gotta be. Okay. I may have to turn off dark reader. I do really don't want to flashbang you guys, though, so we'll see. I'll work with it for now. Do an official support for Raspberry Pi 5? Yeah, that wouldn't work. Wouldn't work at all. BK, how's it going? Good to see you. Let's see. How will you prepare game resources such as graphics, models, sound effects, music, etc.? Yeah, so we're going to get into all that, right? We've been doing a lot of work in the engine for that reason, right? With all the packaging and stuff. So we've got to finish that stuff up. Packaging and resource management. So that is something that we're definitely going to have to think about as well. But we do thankfully have a lot of that already in place. It's just a matter of, kind of finishing up the architecture and finishing up the baking of packages and stuff like that for release. Okay, so let's see. We have that. We're just going to use Vulkan and OpenAL. I don't think we're going to have to use a physics library for this. I think we can actually get away without doing that. I think we can use simple like height map based collision for the vehicles, right? And or the tracks. and or we could use splines for it, right? So I don't think we're actually going to need physics. We can also use like bounding boxes to detect collisions and stuff like that. Okay, so we're going to use Vulkan for this. We don't have Direct 3D yet supported. We don't have. We do have Molten VK on Mac OS. We do need to note that. All right. Okay, so that's that. All right, so target audience. So we talk about target audience. We want to talk about basically who are we thinking that's going to play this game, right? So I don't want to make this like a crazy like over the top. I'm trying to think what the ESRB rating is for 17 plus, right? I don't know that we need to go that far. What is the let me see what the different categories are. Here we go. This is what I was looking for. All right. So, let's see. Everyone 10 plus. They actually have. Yes, let's see. May contain minimal cartoon, fantasy, or mild violence, and infrequent use of mild language. Okay. May contain more cartoon, fantasy, mild violence. So I am thinking like the violence in this is going to be pretty cartoonish, right? We want to be very non-serious with this. We don't want to be like super dark with it, right? We want to have like bright, vibrant colors, kind of cartoony animations, that kind of thing. Let's see. So this might be where we go. May contain violence, suggestive themes, crude humor, minimal blood, simulated gambling, and or infrequent use of strong language. Okay, so that might be where we shoot for, right? Because I think this is intense violence, blood and gore, sexual content, and strong language. Like, I don't think we need to go that far with it, right? And obviously, we're not going here. And so I think we should probably shoot for this one, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and we'll say shooting, or I guess we'll say aiming for an ESRB rating of T, and then see that. So I think that's a pretty good guideline, right? So it should be players that enjoy action, combat, racing, maybe. Mixed with vibrant, cartoonish theme, and I guess we'll say lots of humor. We'll probably expand on this a little bit more, but that's kind of what I'm going for. I think that makes sense. Do you use any version control system for games? So right now, what we're using is we've got everything on Git. When it comes to dealing with assets, I might wind up switching to something else, like SVN maybe, because that's got a little bit better handling of binary assets. I haven't really made that decision yet, but everything right now is going through Git. And so we might try Git LFS to begin with and see how that works out. And if we don't like it, we can just switch to something else. So we also have a mono repo right now. So all of the engine and all of its plugins and the tests and all that stuff is all in one repo. It is sort of split out into little projects, if you will, in terms of folders. And so I'm not thinking we're actually going to include this game in that. I think we probably ought to move it off to a different repo and come up with some sort of setup for that. You're fighting with the LFS right now. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, I know. I've had issues with the LFS in the past too. Which is why I'm thinking like I'll start with that, and if I start to run into a lot of issues with it, then I'll just set up an SVN server and use that instead. If you have the JetBrains services subscription, it is somewhat better. Besides that, GitLab is the best one. It is not fun. Yeah, not fun at all. Yeah, I don't have GitHub LFS is a joke. Yeah, so I've used GitLab's. GitLab. I have used their LFS on a private installation before, and it worked pretty good. So that might be a way that I go as well. But all the source code for the engine is going to stay on GitHub. You do a push and your bandwidth disappears. Yeah, so like the assets, I'm going to have to figure out how to manage that. Because that's not going to be a big issue for this game, because this game is going to be relatively small. I'm going to try and keep it small. But when I go to make the larger game with this, that is going to be an issue. Okay, let's see. Any advice for beginners that I have a background in C and C++? Can I start your playlist? I would say yes. If you understand that stuff, then yes. If you don't have an understanding of graphics techniques, I do kind of explain a lot of that stuff as we go along, but there are parts of it that I skip over as well, just to keep things moving. So I'd like to go back at some point and fill in some of those gaps, but you may wind up having to do a little bit of research on your own. But you should, for the most part, if you understand C and C++, you should be able to follow along. Roman General, good to see you. How are we doing tonight? Thoughts on the Game Engine AI playing Doom? Are we game creators' days numbered? Okay, so I've touched on this a couple of times before on the stream, and my opinion on that hasn't changed. No, AI is not going to be replacing us anytime soon. No way. Because the stuff that it creates is based on averages and weights of inputs from all kinds of stuff over the internet, right? And there's a lot of crap out on the internet, right? There's a lot of bad code, there's a lot of bad assets out there, and all that stuff is also mixed into the pool with all of the other stuff that might be of some use, right? And the other thing is AI doesn't understand logic, right? It's merely taking data that's composed of a whole bunch of sources and then like averaged together, and it's like, well, here you go, right? I've never gotten code that I could actually use from an AI that's production ready. Sometimes it'll be like I'll get the basic idea and I'm like, okay, but that's totally not the way I would write it. I've never gotten anything useful from it, so I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. And anybody that's telling you that it is trying to sell you something. So, just be cautious of that, right? Like, I know NVIDIA is pushing it really hard, right? But what is NVIDIA trying to do? They are trying to sell you something, right? So, yeah, there's no way that's going to be replacing humans anytime soon in terms of that. It's just not going to happen. It's never going to understand, I can't say never, but it's not going to understand how to optimize for this stuff. It's not going to understand how to apply style and things like that, right? It's just not going to work. It's nowhere near where it needs to be to make that happen. Let's see. You did not know C. You started a playlist, learn the engine, and you learn C from it. Awesome. That is good. In the case of Linux, how hurdlesome would it be developing natively instead of relying on Proton, for example? So we actually do support native. We do support Linux natively now, as it stands. So we have an X11 layer, and we actually support that. In fact, I'm not streaming from my Linux install tonight, but most nights I actually stream from that when I'm doing engine dev. So we already actually have that, and that's the primary platform I develop on. I only switch to Windows when I need to do a Windows feature, right? Which is the reason I'm booted into it now. And of course, I boot into Mac OS when I need to do that. But yeah, it already supports that. So thankfully, we don't have to worry about that. These days, I was checking channels in C++, and this stuff seems none of them have a complete course, just copy pasting. I think this is the only one doing this. Yeah, the closest thing that I would say, and it's not even really close, right? It's quite different, is Handmade Hero. He goes into a lot more depth than I do on a lot of stuff. So that's also a very valuable thing to go through if you've got the time. I think it's over 700 episodes now. I stopped following it a while ago just because I don't have the time to keep up with it. But yeah, that's also a very useful series for sure. But yeah, a lot of tutorials out there just sort of stop at a renderer, right? And we started in tutorial format and then ultimately landed on the live stream development format, right? Because we kind of outgrew doing it as a tutorial. For the first 30 episodes, you wrote everything from the video and did not copy paste. That's the way to do it, right? Learned a lot from that. After like 30 videos, it's best to check the GitHub as well. Yes, I would agree with that. Let's see. You got useful production-ready code already, not like an entire class. The question is the AI spatially and temporally coherent? Because it's hallucinating doom frames. I doubt it's coherent because it would require memory. Yeah, I doubt it too. I keep saying AI's ceiling is an average of the code that is in places like GitHub. The majority of that code is mid, therefore AI's ceiling is mid. Exactly my point, right? A majority is mid, or I would argue a majority of it is actually below mid. Most of what's out there is rubbish, right? And it averages all that stuff together. That's how those things work. For specific pesky little bits of confused logic, especially in messy workbases, it does miracles. Oh, you're a Linux guy. Yeah. Yes, I am. Thing is, majority of devs are mid. That's true. Yep. And I don't consider myself an expert either, right? I screw up stuff all the time, but I do look at a lot of code, and I'm just like, look at all that fragmentation. Anyway, so let's see. We got target audience, technology, and platforms. So minimum system requirements. I'm not going to fill that out until we actually get a feel for like how large the game is actually going to be. We're probably not going to know that until towards the end of maybe alpha development. So this game document, by the way, is going to be a living, breathing document. We're going to keep updating this thing as we continue, right? So we're not just going to write it once and then that's it. We're going to continuously update it. So these are in here as stubs so that we can come back to them, right? Okay, so let's talk about style and setting for a little bit. So the art style, we had a couple of things that we were talking about last night. Where we could have like a cyberpunk or a neon punk theming, so like a futuristic setting, either utopian or dystopian. I feel like dystopian's done a lot more often. But with lots of neon lighting, tech, gadgets, etc. And then we had sort of the opposite, version of that too, which is sort of steampunk, right? So instead of having high technology everywhere, we sort of have, lots of brass and gears and all kinds of other stuff. And so, we could pick between these. We could maybe even try to combine them in some way. But I kind of like, I'm kind of torn on which one I want to do, to be completely honest. I do like the cyberpunk theming. Maybe we could mix and match, right? Maybe we could have a little of both. Just for use of the word fragmentation, you're not mid. Fair enough. Fair enough. I do think about it, even though there are times where I think about it and I'm like, okay, it's not really going to matter here. But yeah. Okay. It's hard choosing between Steam and the Cyberpunk. Yeah, I agree. Hmm. I guess we could explore this a little bit, right? Like one thing that I had, um, and this is actually a completely different style, even still, was let me think of the. Let me see if I can find a good example of this before I mention what it is. Um, so one thing that I had as a potential idea is actually from a really old movie. Well, it's really old at this point. Um, called The Fifth Element, right? And so this is a top-down view of what the city might look like, right? Or looked like in that movie. So the idea here is sort of a futuristic kind of style, right? But the cars are like very classic. So it's like retro futuristic, right? And so I think that this could be like kind of a neat direction to go into as well, where we have sort of this mix of cyberpunk but also retro futuristic, right? Um, I think that might be like I've always wanted to create a game in this sort of style. Um, take a look into Mad Max Steelpunk. Yeah, that's another cool one. Yeah. Although, I mean, we could have so like the Mad Max thing is like we could do a level or two that's in that style, right? And we could kind of blend that into this kind of style, right? Where maybe like this is what the city looks like, but by the time you get outside the city, maybe you've got more of a Mad Max thing going on where the vehicles are a lot more beat up and kind of scrapped together and stuff like that because the people living outside the city have got it a lot harder. It's or something like that. Um, so that might be. I don't. I don't really know. I guess this would be retro futuristic, is what this style would be. Neon lighting with bloom. Yeah, I mean, bloom is obviously required for sure. Neon lights and rain or oily surfaces and smoke. Yeah, so I mean, weather is definitely something what we should take into account. I agree. Camera shaking effect on collision. Yeah, supporting motion blur. So that's a post processing thing, right? Motion blur, in my opinion, is something that you have to be very careful with. Um, because just like bloom, it's very easy to overdo motion blur. Like even in this still, right? And this is probably just because of the frame rate and because it's a really old movie, but like motion blur here is overdone, right? Um, so I would not want to necessarily land there. Yeah, I mean that's one of those. That's like a chromatic aberration. It's like overused, I think. right? And so like when we get ready to do our bloom, when we get ready to do all these post processing effects, we're going to be very sparing with them because I think a lot of that stuff is heavily overused. Tammin, good to see you. VHS punk. VHS. You know what? You know what? You've coined a new term. VHS punk. That's what we're going with. Magetsup, you've done it. You came up with the term, right? Um, so it actually, you know what? That actually brings up a good point. That actually brings up a really good point because we could have sort of a VHS type, like as long as we don't, again, as long as we don't overdo it, we could have a post processing effect that looks like you're watching it through a VHS tape, right? Like it's got the tracking along the top and the bottom and that kind of thing. And as long as we don't overdo it, that might be good, kind of a cool effect to add. I don't hate that idea actually. um, so maybe a post effect with VHS tracking, etc. Mildly done. Far Cry Blood Dragon had the tracking when you took too much damage. Yes. Far Cry Blood Dragon was awesome, by the way. That was such a cool concept, right? I can tell they had a blast when they were making that. So actually, let me. Let's see. So it was also this kind of. I guess I can drag this down here. It was also this kind of like 80s futuristic kind of thing, right? So I guess it's like retro futuristic in its own way, but it's like 80s, very 80s centric, right? Like even look at this thumbnail here of what it actually looked like, right? The title screen. Let's see. I'm looking for. I don't know that I'm going to be able to find like a still of that, what it looks like, but like this sort of graininess that's in here is kind of a cool effect. An apocalypse has had an apocalypse. Yeah. So yeah, that might be a cool little addition, right? That we can add in here. Like, so like, we'll put in here even, if you take a lot of damage. Right? And so I'm just bullet pointing ideas for now, and we can actually like make this cohesive in a bit. So like retro, wow, retro. Is retro punk a term? Right? I don't know. It's like retro futuristic. Maybe mixed with style punk or style punk, cyberpunk. Right? Like maybe I think the two of those would be kind of a cool mixture, right? Like most cyberpunk stuff is kind of based around the 80s, right? It's like the 80s. I should say it's not based around the 80s. It's the vision of what the future looked like from the 80s perspective, right? Whereas retrofuturistic to me is more like what it would have looked like maybe in the 50s or 60s, a little bit more towards the Art Deco style. Style punk is what I'm coming up with. Yeah, you're not wrong. Maybe that's even what we call style punk, right? Style punk, right? So it's like a which contains all of these other things, right? So I guess we have. I think steampunk is going to wind up being out. As much as I love steampunk, it doesn't really fit, right? All of these other things kind of fit together, right? We could actually make all this stuff work. I think like a retro futuristic style, sort of mixed with a cyberpunk style, with like some VHS effects would be really cool. And you'd still have like the all the neon lighting and the tech. We'll say tech/gadgets. That kind of thing. Electric vehicles, etc. Right? Let's see. Oh, we have ads. So we'll just hold on for a moment for ads. I happen to catch it this time around. A few seconds late, I think, but. So I'm actually going to copy this image. I'm actually going to put some of these images in the references section. So we've got that one. Let me actually paste a second image in here. And I'll catch you guys up once we're done with ads. I realize you can't see the screen, but that's okay. We'll catch up when the ads are done. You do that too. The first time I saw was in Pirate Software about the ads. Yeah, that's actually where I got the idea from. I thought it was a pretty good idea. I haven't actually been as good about that on these design streams as I should be. Normally when I'm coding, I see it a lot faster. But yeah, I try to keep people from missing content, right? So that's the whole idea there. And I thought that was a really good idea, so I kind of nabbed that from him. So yeah, this might be kind of what it looks like. Like I won't copy this exactly, right? But here's an idea of what it might look like if you're being chased by the popo, right? And so here are some other examples that I had of in terms of like gameplay ideas, right? Is the classic Final Fantasy VII motorcycle scene where you're batting at other players, and here's Road Rash 3D, which is another example from that same era of games. And so I think these sort of gameplay ideas mixed with some of the other stuff that we have and the style that we have, I think is going to work out pretty well. The game will be essentially in Coruscant. I'm not sure what that is. Maybe I should know what that means, but. Oh, okay. I forgot about this completely. Yeah, it's this. It's been a minute since I've seen this stuff. So I don't know. Like, one thing that I don't want to do is I don't want to make the environment like the whole story, right? I don't want it to be too distracting. So like one thing that I don't really want to do is I don't want to have like a city that's as detailed as, say, like what you have in Grand Theft Auto, for example. And the reason that I don't want that is because you're going to be flying past this stuff at very high rates of speed generally, right? And so there will be parts where maybe you won't be, and maybe you'll be using the slower vehicles that can get you into tighter places and stuff like that. But for the most part, we have to be careful in terms of scale, and I don't want to make like this huge gigantic city that you can't actually like fully explore, right? So like there'll be parts like maybe something like this maybe a street like this that you would go down, right? Something that has some details but isn't, actually this is actually pretty decent piece of reference here. So again, I'm putting these in here as reference. We're not going to use these things directly, right? We're going to come up with all of our own concept art for these things. But it's just kind of like anytime we see something that kind of goes for the style that we're looking at, that's more or less what we're going to do. And so actually, this image actually has me thinking about the actual art direction. So rather than going for something that is what you might consider overly cartoonish or overly realistic in either one of those, what if we were to go with something that was kind of looked like it was hand drawn in some circumstances, right? Like what if we did something that's that looks a little bit like this in terms of style, right? Like another example that I can think of. Let me see if I can find a good example of this. Yeah, I guess, let's see. That's not really high resolution enough. Let me see if I can find a high resolution. Here we go. Okay. Something like Borderlands in terms of visual style, right? Now, not necessarily like as crazy with the materials on that as they go, right? We don't necessarily have to be like this detailed, but like this kind of sort of sketchy, hand-drawn look to things might be a cool direction to take it in. That might be kind of a cool thing to make as well. I've always kind of wanted to make a game in this style. I think that might be fun, right? And we'd have to write some neat shaders to actually achieve some of this stuff, like the outlines for stuff if we wanted that. Made a 2D game with 3D assets for OLC Code Jam 2024. Nice. Used Godot. One criticism of the Godot, the forward plus and the compatibility renderers don't look equal. So, yeah, I don't know what the compatibility render is. Admittedly, I've not used Godot a lot. But we're eventually going to have all those different types of rendering as well. So right now, all we have is a forward renderer, which I think will be enough for what we're going to do here. But eventually, we'll have those other styles of renderers as well. Good morning. So what's the game idea did you finalize yesterday? Yes. So we have the game idea locked down. Now we're kind of talking art style, which I'm just going to copy this real quick and put it in here as a reference. Oops, did not apparently copy the thing. Copy image. There we go. We're going to put drawn style. And this is Borderlands 2 that we're using as an example, right? So I'm thinking in terms of like overall style, it'll be a mix, something between this and this. I think would be kind of cool. Anyway, so what we're going to make is we're sticking with the high concept that we had last night, which is the endless runner style of game, right? And I used quotes around that because it's going to deviate from that somewhat. So instead of running, the player pilots a vehicle, right? And so there'll be like a hoverboard or a motorcycle or a spaceship, something like that, right? Um, and you travel along a rotor path that has multiple lanes, that has obstacles. You avoid enemies, engage in combat with those enemies while you're moving. Um, and then you'll have different weapons that you can use, different abilities. And then the player will also have different types of vehicles that are each have their own abilities themselves, and that are used for different challenges or environments, right? Difficulty will increase as the game goes on. Later levels may also have vertical tracks that the player can switch to when using a flying vehicle. So that means that not only do we have lanes that go horizontally, but we also have sort of tracks that go upwards that you can switch to as well, which means that you have a greater sense of depth and exploration in the levels. There will be secrets that you can find. There will be extra things that you can pick up, things of that nature. And then vehicles are not tied to a level, so you can use any vehicle for any level, assuming it's capable of traversing the said level. So you can't use a motorcycle on a water level, for example. So the first level might be initially traversed with a hoverboard, but if the player returns there upon getting the spaceship, there could be extra content in the above tracks that the player could not previously see or get to without the proper vehicle. Same goes for underwater. And so we have some vehicles here, like we have the hoverboard, which is land, water surface only, right? So they can only go over land or a water surface, but they can't fly, they can't dive. And we'll also say slower, but more maneuverable. I think I spelled that right. Yes. Okay. And then the motorcycle is land only, but it's faster, but less maneuverable, right? Then we have a boat, which is, water surface only. And then we have a submarine, which can go along the water surface and below. Slower than the boat, right? Which is what you would kind of expect. And then we have a jetpack, which I don't know if we're going to keep this one, but the jetpack basically is slower, let's see, slower lateral movement, right? So side to side or front and back, but greater maneuverability, right? And then the spaceship / plane is the fastest, is above surface only, but far less maneuverable, right? And so those are basically the different vehicles that we would have. Each of those would have various upgrades that they could get, that you could then use to get yourself further, right? So that's kind of where we're headed, right? And we're just kind of talking art style. So we started at cyberpunk, right, / neon punk, and then came up with VHS punk, which is kind of a joke, right? But like basically that's an effect that sits on top of cyberpunk. That's like a post effect that gives you like VHS tracking, like the old VCRs would give you. And if you take damage, like the tracking gets worse and that kind of thing. And then we're thinking, instead of like cyberpunk, which is sort of 80s based futuristic, we're thinking retro futuristic style mixed with cyberpunk. So instead of like the 80s version of what the future looked like, maybe it's the 50s or 60s version of what the future looked like. And then we also have, we're kind of coming up with style punk as a mixture of all of this, right? I misspoke and actually said style punk earlier, and it's like, well, that's kind of what we're making, so that's what we're sticking with, right? Let's see. Compatibility render is just the minimum of the visual that they can show, so it doesn't lag in web view. Oh, okay, gotcha. First time chatter, welcome. What's usually the go to network model for multiplayer co op games like Among Us or Lethal Company? Heard there are peer to peer or client server with both listen and dedicated servers. Is there a concept like peer to peer, but where just one player is a server? So I know that there are several games in the past that work that way. The first one that comes to my mind is like Tribes. The old Tribes games worked that way, where one person could host, um, they would act as a server and then also be able to play. Which meant you had to have a little bit more of a powerful machine to be able to do that, right? But that wound up being, I think that was peer to peer as well, if I remember correctly. Um, and so you had to have somebody's IP address to connect to that. So yeah, which obviously comes with its own set of challenges. But that's the way that old school multiplayer used to work. Anytime that there wasn't like a central server that you connected to with a lobby and all that stuff. You just made a terrible error to try and rebase a Unity project. Ooh, that sounds terrible. That sounds terrible indeed. All right, let's see. Let me catch up on. Let's see. Sun glare effect. Yeah, I think that's probably something we can get in there for sure. Very Kung Fury. And make sidebars so we have a 4:3 ratio in the VHS. That'd be an interesting option. I don't know that I'd want to force that though, because a lot of people don't like that. I like the idea. In fact, I prefer 4:3 monitors actually, but they don't make them anymore. But yeah, I don't. That could be something that we could put in as a game option, maybe, but I wouldn't want to force that. I don't think, because you're giving up a lot of screen real estate that you could use for like HUD elements and stuff like that too. Max, how's it going? Good to see you. There's a direct relationship between the speed of your vehicle and the speed you can stream in assets, textures from the hard drive. Yes, that is true. As far as the surrounding scenery is concerned, yeah. So we're gonna definitely have to do a little bit of work around asset streaming, depending on how big we make the levels, right? If we keep the levels relatively small and relatively, I guess if we don't go crazy on the detail, we might be able to load the whole thing into memory at once. We'll have to see how that works. That's going to be an interesting thing for sure. More than likely, we're going to have to do asset streaming for that. Off topic, are you still using the C compiler? I tuned in a couple weeks ago and you're talking about using the C++ compiler for compile times name hashing. I am still using C. I do have the string hashing implemented, but not compile time, which I think for now will be enough. If I truly hit a point where I need to implement that, I might just write like some sort of pre-processing routine that runs to handle that for me. Or maybe I'll just dump all of those out into a header file or something that is then compiled in with the code. So I'm not doing that yet, but if that happens to be a performance bottleneck, then we will. Let's see. You can use stun servers too. You lost a day of work, never do that. Just taking a look into your playlist. What are the prerequisites to follow the engine videos? Sorry you lost a day of work. That sucks. I've been there. Did you... So that's one of the reasons I commit often, right? Which is why Kohi has so many commits. But yeah, I commit early and commit often for that reason exactly, so I don't lose work. Because I've lost work far too many times. So the prerequisites, I would say, is that you need to have a decent command of C. I do go over a lot of stuff in C along with it, and I do have about the first third of an intro to C series, but like I don't go into anything too terribly complex. So there's like the first third of a primer on that. I need to continue working on that series. But yeah, you need to have a basic command of C. You need to understand things like, pointers specifically, because we use them a lot, obviously. And then it might help if you have some graphics programming experience, but if you don't, I try to
Good
explain
evening.
a lot of the
How's
things.
the game idea going?
Diamond, thank you for the tier 1 sub. You've been sub for 10 months. That's awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you very much for the support. The game idea is coming along nice. It's actually, it's evolving nicely. I'll walk you through it here in just a second. Let's see. So the prerequisites for the engine videos are basically, you might want to have some graphics programming knowledge. If you don't, that's probably going to be fine, but it might make it a little bit more challenging. I try to go over stuff as best as I can. But, there are portions of it where I have to sort of hand wave and sort of gloss over things, because otherwise we'd be here for 3 years further trying to explain some of those things and all the detail that there is about it. But yeah, I think, if you have a decent command of C or even C++, you should be fine. Okay, so Diamond says that Diamond had zero graphics programming experience, knowledge, and it turned out fine. Okay, well, that's good to know. I always assume that I leave things out because I have all the context up here already. So I always assume that there's things that I forget to mention because I have it all up here and I just know it. But it's good to get a little bit of validation that folks with no programming experience were able to get through it. So that's good. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So yeah, the game design is coming along nicely. We're actually building out the game design document now, and starting to hammer out some of the details. So we have our high concept from last night, and that largely hasn't changed. We're starting to put bullet points in here and get some of these details in here. We did a lot of talking about art style, right? So we came up with this. I mistakenly said style punk. Which actually is a mixture of all of these things. So it's like a retro futuristic style mixed with cyberpunk. And so what I mean by that retro futuristic is like, think Fifth Element, right? Where the cars are and there's like a little bit of an Art Deco thing going on, from like the 50s or 60s instead of the 80s. And so it would be a mixture between this and sort of a cyberpunk / neon punk look is what I'm thinking. And then, this is kind of what I'm thinking in terms of the actual like visual style is somewhere between these two. So I'm thinking like the hand-drawn look would be kind of cool. Maybe not as detailed as like what Borderlands has, but like something that looks kind of like this instead. So that's kind of where we're at the moment. In addition to a couple of effects that we've discussed, which is maybe having some post effects with like VHS tape tracking, right? So if you take a lot of damage, you get like some screen distortion, you get that tracking along the top and the bottom, and stuff like that, right? And so, yeah, we've talked a little bit about that. We've done a little bit of talking about the different vehicles and some of the pros and cons of those, and maybe we'll come up with some concepts for those at some point soon. Let's see. Have some water. You talk a lot because of my questions. Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you for the hydrate redeem, by the way. Yeah, my voice is usually pretty wrecked after these streams. Especially ones where I do more talking and less, like, typing. Let's see. How many hours per week have you worked on the engine so far? So an average, it's probably about 10 to 15 hours a week. So it's not even really part-time, which is why it's taken me 3 years to get where I am, right? Because I do have a full-time job. And I have other responsibilities outside of that. So on average, it's about 10 to 15 hours a week. I wish I could do it full time, but obviously I don't have the following for that, right? Maybe 1 year, right? Maybe one of these years. But yeah, for me, it's very much a hobby thing at this point. We do more talking and less. That's true. Because I do look at code and go, a lot. Tammin, you're absolutely right about that. Let's see. I think a lot of Xbox 360 games did peer-to-peer multiplayer, which is why you sometimes have to do host migration. Reminds me of Blade Runner's aesthetic. Yeah, Blade Runner's another good example of that, for sure. The old school Judge Dredd also. Right, but I do want to keep it, even if we do go the sort of dystopian route, I do want to keep it a little bit like brighter, vibrant colors, right? I don't want something that's like super dull and just nothing but gray everywhere. Like what I think of immediately. Let's see. Right. This is a beautiful game, right? This is Elden Ring, but like there's a lot of gray in it, right? There's some spots that have color, but like I don't want a color palette like this, right? Not for this game. I definitely want something that's more colorful, right? Like here's another great example. In fact, I'm going to copy this image too. And so what I should mention is like these images that I'm putting in here, these are purely for reference, right? So we're going to come up with our own concept art as well, right? It looks like these are from like Clone Wars, I guess, which is kind of neat, right? So we're going to kind of create our own concept art, but this is just kind of the direction we want to go, just to kind of get an idea behind it, right? Monster Hunter is also peer-to-peer. Definitely keeps the game alive. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, we won't be doing networking in this game, though. I'm one guy. If I added networking to this, that doubles the scope, basically, of the game. And I don't want to do that, so. All right. So, I guess what we should do. So we have art style kind of at least half nailed down, right? Thank you for the follow, by the way. Appreciate that. But we don't have sort of the setting, right? So we need to kind of come up with a setting. And so the setting is basically, where does this take place? Where does and it doesn't necessarily even have to be one place, right? It'll probably start off as one place, right? So let's say the game takes place in the distant future. I guess we could say dystopian future, right? Where technology advances have reshaped the world and humanity in general for both good and bad. We'll also say, we could say something along the lines of, maybe we go with like numerous wars have left much of the world destroyed and uninhabitable. leaving most of the population to gather in cities. Outskirts and wastelands are primarily occupied by bandits, thugs, criminals, etc. And are generally fairly lawless, right? It's kind of what I'm thinking. I'm just kind of like stream of consciousness here. A little bit Mad Max, but not necessarily completely, right? Because the one difference that I want to have is like while much of civilization has been destroyed, we'll say Mother Nature has reclaimed much of the abandoned land, right? So like think lots of overgrowth, clean air from lack of pollution, etc., right? So like these are areas that we're talking about that have been like abandoned and forgotten about for well over 100 years. Yeah, so it's you know, instead of like in Mad Max everything is like desert, right? And we're not going for that here, because I think that that's like there's a very specific set of things that would have to happen for the whole world to be like that, and even then I don't think that that's necessarily realistic, right? I think that in a lot of cases, like you know, a lot of places would go back to how they were beforehand, where you know maybe humans ruined it, right? But in 100 years, once nature has a chance to sort of overgrow and the balance has a chance to restore, you know, the places can become quite beautiful once again. Yeah, so like it might be cool to explore like an overgrown abandoned city as like a level, right? And maybe that, you know, overgrown abandoned city is maybe it's run by, you know, I don't know, like thugs or something, right? But then, you know, maybe you have to like do, I don't know, some missions or something. I haven't quite figured out how the story is going to go yet, but like maybe it turns out that they're not the bad guys after all, that maybe they're just, you know, they're cast that way by the folks in the city to keep people from leaving the city and to maintain control over people that are in the city and make them scared to go out to these other places, right? Propaganda, if you will. That's kind of the way that I'm thinking that, you know, the setting is gonna kind of look. So like you think that the people out there are just completely lawless and all they do is, you know, murder and pillage and stuff like that, but you know, really, you know, that does exist, but like a lot of the people that are in these places tend to actually just be regular people who are just trying to survive. Do we support controller? We don't. That would be an interesting thing to try and support. Which actually, that does bring up a good point of something we should specify in here. So let's do right here. Input. So, primary input on PC will be keyboard with maybe mouse for limited things like camera, menus, etc. Controller support, we'll put a question mark, right? Maybe if we get a chance, we'll add that. But otherwise, I don't know. Let's see. Darian, can you retype your comment in English? Because I don't understand what you've typed there, unfortunately. Yeah, try to keep chat to English, please. Okay. So, and I guess we can talk about like key mappings and stuff like that at some point as well. I guess we'll put a section in here for that as well. Control mapping. Right, we could put a to-do on that once we start figuring out controls. We need to add that as well. I guess if we say controller support, like, you know, what controllers? Right, like I've got a wired 360 controller in there. That's probably what I would use. But then also, you know, getting that to work on Windows is actually going to be pretty easy. Getting that to work on Linux is probably going to be a little bit more of a challenge. Getting that to work on Mac, I have no idea. So I'm going to have to research that. Google Translate says he's asking whether engine development is already completed. So no. And I don't think the engine development will ever be completed. We're always going to be adding stuff to it. Even after this game, right? We're going to be adding a lot more stuff to it. So yeah, engine development's not complete yet. The reason we're doing this is we're going to try and get like an idea of what we want in the game, and then we're going to go through it and pick out a list of features that we actually need to add to the game, or add to the engine to support the game, right? And then we'll get those features in, and then we can actually start the game. So that's my reason for doing this now, is that once we have the design, we'll know what features we need, and we can have a targeted list of things to knock out, and then we can have at it, right? All right. Speaking of which, I suppose we could come down here in appendices, right? And we'll just do let's do Appendix B. Required engine features, right? And I'm just going to list this section lists features that are required but not yet present in the engine at the time of writing. And maybe we could expand that to equal all features that we're going to need, but I think that's a little bit verbose for this. So a couple things I can think of off the top of my head that we're going to need. We're going to need Bloom, because we don't have that yet. We're going to need emissive maps, which we have about 90% of what we need to actually get that working. That's mostly going to be shader work and adding another map to materials, so I'm not too worried about that one. We are going to need post effects, right? And so I guess actually Bloom kind of goes under that, right? So let's just get rid of that one. We're going to need Bloom. We're going to need a outline shader, right? One thing I would like to investigate, and this is actually something that that Gearbox talked about a number of years ago, that I thought was a really cool idea. Let me see if I can find it. know if I'm going to be able to actually find it or not. Because it was kind of like part of a talk that they had. I don't think I'm going to be able to find it. All right. Well, basically the premise was, so I guess I could just pull up any old Borderlands image here, because this was basically what they were more or less talking about. Let's use this one. All right. The old famous porta potty, right? So what they were talking about doing was, if you take a look at this, like all the shadows for this are just drawn the traditional way. And what they talked about in one of these talks that they were having was actually having this sort of crosshatch effect that you see on certain parts of the texture actually form the shadows, right? So instead of just having this shaded surface like under here, that shading would actually be made up of little like hand-drawn crosshatches, which would be a really cool thing that I would like to do. So that would be a neat thing to experiment with. I know they demoed like a version of it working, like an experimental version of it, but then they never did it in Borderlands 3 for some reason. And I don't know if that's because it was too expensive or what, but I always thought that was kind of cool. So like, we're going to put hand-drawn shadows in there as a maybe, right? Thanks for the response. My writer English isn't good, but I think that's so understand. Okay, yeah, no worries about it. And yeah, I never have a problem. Like if you try to type something in English, I will do my best to get it, right? Like I realize it's not everybody's first language. It's just I can't understand what you've written there, right? So I have to try and do my best to try and understand it too, right? But yeah, I mean, the sentence you just wrote is totally fine, though. You'll most likely need to add compute shader support for the engine. So the only thing that I can think we might need compute for is like particles, which actually is, we need particles. But I don't necessarily have to use compute for that. So like I do want to add compute support for the future, but I don't think I need to add it. I don't think I need to add it for this game. We'll need HDR. HDR, it's kind of a cool looking thing. I don't think we need it though. I mean, we kind of have some tone mapping that's already done in our shaders already, but it's not like dynamic. But yeah, I'm going to put a question mark next to this one because that one may or may not make it in. Hand-drawn shadows, I think, would be hard to make look good in motion without too much flickering. Yeah, and that is a... Well, my thought behind that is to make the shadows actually, or at least the hand-drawn aspect of the shadows, screen space, right? So I would project them kind of similar to what you do for the surface of water, so that, it looks correct. But yeah, that's something we can experiment with. Like that's a want, not a need, for sure. I guess I should probably, I mean, like I have question marks next to like optional things, but like macOS supports DualSense, DualShock 4, and Xbox controllers, I know, at least with wired and Bluetooth. Not sure if you need Xcode to get it to work though. I don't think I'll need Xcode, right? Because that's just the IDE, right? So from a code perspective, I shouldn't need that. I just don't know what libraries it needs under the hood. Like if it uses some version of UDEV, like what Linux uses, or if it uses something else. I've literally not looked into it at all. I know there is support for it. I haven't looked into it at all. But that is another thing, right? Controller support's another thing. We can also put resource streaming, right? We are going to need some sort of, let me actually put this up here. We're going to need mesh LOD. We have LOD for our terrains right now, which is, or for our height map terrains, which is dynamic, right? It's automatically generated, but we are going to need LOD for meshes, so static meshes. We are going to need some sort of animation system, and I put that in quotes because we might be able to use some hackery to kind of avoid having to write a full-blown animation system. Because the animation system that I want to make for the engine is going to be pretty robust and complicated and going to take a while, right? So if I can get around doing that for this game, I'm going to do it. But we'll see, right? We'll see where we wind up landing for that. Let's see. What else were we talking about here? Oh, we need some sort of like a spline editor for roads, etc. So that might be a good way to do that, so that we can like dynamically create roads in real time versus having to model them out. I'm going to put a question mark next to that because we may not wind up doing that either. It may make more sense for something of this scale to just sort of manually model everything out. But that's kind of a nice to have. Let's see. I see your submitted videos about the game engine, and I'm very interested in that. You're from Cuba. Okay. Welcome. Sorry if I didn't respond to some of your questions for me. I probably didn't understand you. Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah, no worries. That's okay. I realize sometimes I talk a little bit fast too, so I'll try to slow that down a little bit. And I also have a habit of mumbling, which is not great either, but okay. You might appreciate the name of the game, though. I don't know if you saw this before. Where did I put that? I put it... Where did I put that? I think I must have put it all the way at the end. Oh, yeah. So, the name of the game that we're thinking of currently is Velocidad, which is a joke, right? So yeah, we're actually thinking of naming it Velocidad and making like tons of jokes all throughout the game. Velocidad being one of them. All right. Appendix A, yeah. I appreciate that. Let's see. What else should we get into? So... I guess we should probably think about... So we have setting... I'm okay with this for the setting for now. I think that's probably enough detail. We should probably also come up with a story eventually. Story is probably the last thing we're going to develop, actually. And I say that because I want to come up with like the world that the story exists in first, and then sort of bake the story into that world. That seems to be kind of a common thing that I've found in terms of design for um, a lot of games out there. Is they kind of build the world first and then come up with the story. So I guess we should say story slash plot, right? And we don't need to have like a super complicated story or plot for this. I don't think. Um, I don't even know if we're gonna do like cutscenes or whatnot either. Um, we might not do like FMV cutscenes or something like that. We might just do like comic book page type of things where like stuff just pops in for like cutscenes, right? Just keep it simple. What is the story of Mario Kart? Exactly. Yeah. Right. So like we don't need to go bananas with that, but it might be nice to have a little bit of story, right? Um, okay. So I guess let's tuck into some of these vehicles, right? And sort of maybe think about what are some of the things that maybe we could do to make these a little bit more interesting or upgradable, right? Like um, upgrades for the hoverboard, right? Upgrades for the motorcycle. Um, like maybe the motorcycle can have like a maybe the motorcycle could have like a turbo added to it to make it faster, right? Um, can turbo, right? More speed, right? Maybe the hoverboard um, initially can't go over water, right? So over water capability is an upgrade, right? Because maybe it can't go over the water surface initially, but maybe we can upgrade it to be able to do that. Um, that kind of stuff, right? Rockets attached to the motorcycle. You mean like attached to the back of it for a one-time boost? Yeah, there you go. Okay, so like um, we could do rockets, or we could do. Actually, rockets could have a second sort of mechanic that work for it, right? So like, um, so we could say rocket boost, right? So we can say it's a one-time use um, for lots of speed. But also fries an enemy that is directly behind when triggered, right? So it kind of becomes like this this double thing that you kind of get for it. So like if you've got a really tough enemy chasing you or something, and you just want to get away from him, you can just fire off your rocket boost, and not only does it get you away from him faster, but it fries him in the process. That might be kind of a cool thing to have, right? And so like the boat upgrades for that one might be a front mounted machine gun, right? Pretty self-explanatory, right? And the interesting thing about that is it's front mounted, right? So it's mounted to the bow of the boat, right? But like as you're going over waves and stuff, it's going to make it, super powerful when it hits, but it's not going to be terribly accurate, right? So maybe it shoots, fairly large bullets fairly quickly, but maybe 20% of the bullets actually hit, that kind of thing. Right. So powerful but inaccurate. Think waves. Yeah, so the submarine upgrades. So for the submarine, maybe the Submarine can have torpedoes. Torpedoes, right? Jetpack. Oops. What would a jetpack upgrade be? Maybe the jetpack doesn't have any. I mean, it does fly, like flying is its thing, right? Hand assist additional jets. Iron Man like hand blasters. Horizontal jets. So like, okay. Okay, let's write that down for now. We can always improve on that later, right? Iron Man style hand blasters. That could be interesting, right? Become invulnerable to weapons. So I would say, actually, an interesting mechanic that we could have is so we have cons, right? And we have pros. So an interesting con of the jetpack is its fuel tank is explosive, right? So that would be like, you don't want to spend a whole lot of time in front of somebody that's got bullets flying at you if you're using the jetpack. Spaceship upgrades, EMP that fries all enemies within range. That's a good one. EMP is a good one. Yeah, I agree with that. That fries enemies within a given range. Let's see. Planning on building an infinite Insta profile feed with photos and users can click on it. Is that a good idea? I mean, Instagram already kind of does that, doesn't it? I mean, as a project to like practice coding on, I would say it's a good idea. Is it marketable? Probably not, but it would be a good thing to achieve, right? You'd probably learn a lot doing it. So I would say from that perspective, yeah, it probably is a good idea. What if the hoverboard started off as a skateboard and hoverboard is an upgrade? Ooh. That's an interesting idea. The only problem is, there is one problem with that, actually. And that is basically that you would have to animate the player like pushing with their foot, right? And technically speaking, skateboards are very variable speed, right? So they're going to slow down when you're not pushing with your foot. They're always slowing down. I wonder if we have maybe a powered skateboard that would be a little bit more consistent, right? Where it is on wheels, but you know what I mean? Electric skateboard. Yeah, there you go. Kind of envisioned electric skateboard. Yeah, okay. That's a good idea. So, electric skateboard, right? So I guess let's do this. Let's do pros, cons, right? So pros, more maneuverable, right? Slow, right? And then hoverboard, right? Can hover over land and water. Okay, so land, water surface with upgrade. Does not fly or dive. That's interesting. Okay, I like that. Right, and then we have here basically we have sort of the opposite here. Right, so it's fast in this case. The motorcycle is fast, but less maneuverable, right? Whoops, let's just say less maneuverable. So like so far we only have one upgrade. I mean, this one I guess has two, but like we can come up with more upgrades. So pros, cons. So pros in this case is going to be I guess we'll say this is medium speed. Medium maneuverability, right? So those are pros. Cons, handling affected by water waves, right? Yeah, that works. Boat's a little weak. Yeah, exactly. But that's kind of the purpose of it, right? And then maybe we can also, you know, maybe have some sort of speed upgrade for it. Where like medium is affected by RNG. Yeah, more or less. Yep, exactly. It starts as a Roomba. That's funny. Kind of, let's see. Yeah, I mean, it is a video game, yeah. The logic of what's happening doesn't necessarily have to be entirely consistent. Yeah, that's true. Maybe stronger weapons instead of velocity. Or deploy drones. Interesting. Okay. That's maybe something, yeah, we could look into that. But I think, yeah, like the front-mounted machine gun is going to be very powerful but highly inaccurate, right? Because of the waves. So like when you do actually land a hit, it's going to hurt. But yeah. Boats can drop naval mines. That's a good one. Actually, do we have that just be... Maybe that's its combat feature, right? Drops naval mines, right? And then it can also get an upgrade that does this, right? The motorcycle combat feature is hand melee. Think baseball bat, tire iron, etc. Right? The combat feature of the electric skateboard is also going to be the same thing, pretty much. So the submarine, its combat feature would have to be See, I think the torpedoes should probably be like, I suppose we could have the torpedoes as... We could have that, but then its upgrade could be like... Is it OES or is it just ES? I don't know. All right, so like maybe its combat features regular torpedoes, and maybe its upgrade is nuclear torpedoes, right? And then its pros and cons, right? So its cons is it's slow. Its pro is can dive below surface, right? We might have to think of some more stuff besides that. Pros. Highly maneuverable, right? And I guess combat ability. Combat feature, we'll say, is going to be, again, hand melee. All right. And then combat's feature for this will be we'll say laser guns. Forward facing. Another upgrade to this might be homing missiles. Okay, that might be a cool one. Its pros, extremely fast, right? It's the fastest thing that we have. Cons, much harder to maneuver in tight spaces due to speed, right? Okay. Jetpack grenades. Moto with firearms, yeah, that's another one. We could have... But then, technically speaking, we could do firearms also with the skateboard, right? So maybe this is a player upgrade. Right? Where the player themselves actually has the firearms, right? That could be used. But you can only use them in certain circumstances, right? Like, I suppose it would make sense to also be able to use it on a boat, right? So you could use it on a boat, but like not a submarine. The jetpack, you could use it there. You could maybe use it there, but not in the spaceship either, right? Because those things you're sitting inside of them. Not sure if the page breaks bother you in Google Docs, but you can hit format, switch to pageless format. They haven't been bothering me just because I used Word for like 20 plus years and never bothered changing it. But can we get a chain as a weapon when on the motorcycle like that game? Yeah, I mean, we could do that, right? Also has chain as a weapon. Yeah, like in Road Rash. Yep. Which I think... it doesn't show it here. It shows the bat here. Or the 2x4, I guess it is. which is super hilarious, by the way, that you're just carrying around a 2x4 to beat other people with as you drive by them. But yeah. All right. So, with all of that, I think this is where we're going to end tonight because my voice is kind of shot now. But we've made some pretty good progress on this, I think. We actually have at least the start of a game design document, right? And keep working on this, and I'll keep adding to it. And next time we'll probably jump back into code on the next stream, I'm thinking. But we'll keep coming back to this every once in a while when we think of something or something we want to add or discuss. We can also come back to this. Do you stream only on Wednesdays and Thursdays? Thursday and Friday. Yeah, it's so depending on what your time zone is. Yeah, I only stream on Wednesdays and Thursdays, Eastern Standard Time. Yeah, so like I said, depending on where you are, that might actually wind up being Thursday and Friday for you. But yeah, it's I only stream on those 2 days because, like I said, I do have a full-time job and have other responsibilities, so I don't have a lot of days in the week where I can actually do it, right? So yeah, for now, it's that. I mean, hey, that could change if I get a big enough following, right? But yeah, I'm definitely not there, not anywhere near enough to be able to do this full time, unfortunately. So that's what we're doing for now. But yeah, we will be back. I'm actually going to be completely disconnected this weekend because I'm going to be spending some time with the wife, doing some stuff this weekend. So I'm going to be completely disconnected. But we will be back next week for some more streams for sure. Okay. So let me quickly find somebody to raid. And before I do that, though, I do want to just say thank you to all of you guys who were here and interacted. This was a lot of fun. I really liked this sort of brainstorming, coming up with all these ideas that we're going to make into a game. I think this is going to be a super fun project to work on, and being able to work on it with you guys in tandem is awesome, right? So next week we need to have a special birthday stream. Yeah, that's true, because my birthday is next week. So I haven't decided what I want to do there yet, though, actually. So maybe. I'm going to put a maybe on that because it's technically next Friday is my birthday, right? So I will let you know by next week if I'm going to do something there because I don't know yet. But at least the Thursday stream needs to go past midnight. Yeah, I mean, maybe. Yeah, that should be possible. But that's fair enough. That's fair enough, Taman. Yeah, we could probably make that happen. But yeah, but as for tonight, that's where we got to end it. So thank you guys so much for being here and interacting. It's been a lot of fun. If you haven't already, I would encourage you to follow me on the Twitch or the YouTube side, or both, if you so desire. It helps me, the follower count helps me grow the channel and helps me attract more attention to the channel and grow things and make it bigger so we can reach more people, right? And hopefully get more people into this kind of stuff. So definitely helps me out a lot. Thank you very much for the follow. I appreciate that. And let me find somebody to raid. Let's see. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time looking tonight. I'm just going to see if I can find something. Something that's kind of loosely related to what we're doing. Let's see. All right. We're going to raid we're going to raid Jitsbo. He's making a pretty cool looking retro FPS. He's using Godot. And it's kind of a sweet thing. So ask him about throwing books if you haven't seen it already. And he'll know what you mean. And he'll show that off. So all right. So I'm going to leave you guys with Jitsbo, and thank you again for being here. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you next time. See ya.